Hello again, everybody. It is time once again for the Silver Bullets podcast. I'm Michael Citro.
And I'm Chip Minnich.
Chip, it's been a minute since you and I have had a show. We signed off saying we'd be back in 2 weeks, but we forgot that it was going to be a holiday.
Yeah, I mean, and we were just kind of thinking that, by and large, the Memorial Day weekend, how likely is it that people would be clamoring for Ohio State news? So it's good to be back talking, even though, there hasn't been a ton of Ohio State stuff. There's been movement within the college football world, so it'll be good to have some discussions around those.
I enjoy a good discussion with you, Chip, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's been pretty quiet, especially with all the visits and stuff. You would think that it would be, a lot more news, but it's been kind of, kids just checking the school out and going to camps and all kinds of stuff like that. And it just hasn't really been a flood of news like we thought it might be.
Right. I mean, I freely admit that with all of the anticipation for the first weekend in June, with the official visits and Mark Pantoni saying they were, in a typical year, I believe, like 50 official visitors, and just for the month of June they were anticipating about 50, that I guess I presumed, there's going to be a ton of commitments. But in hindsight, I probably should have thought, these kids, even though they were anxious to visit Ohio State, and I know that official visits are still going to be going on this weekend and throughout the summer until fall camp opens, it would be unfair to those young men who, they're getting an opportunity to not only see Ohio State, but other colleges across the country, for them not to be necessarily premature in making a commitment to Ohio State until they've had an opportunity to have other schools to compare them to.
Yeah. Well, we don't have a slew of commitments, but we do have some stuff to talk about, so we can dive right into that. We'll start with the transfer window, or the transfer portal. And we have found out since you and I last talked that Tyreek Johnson, who I believe had just announced he was entering the portal when our last show dropped, or when we recorded it, he's transferring to Nebraska. He's going to be an opponent.
And that should be interesting. I wish him nothing but the best. I might be mistaken, but I seem to recall as soon as Tyreek Johnson put his name in the portal, it might have been just one of those little nuggets of news that comes across on Twitter that he was visiting Nebraska. So obviously there was strong interest on both sides. As I said a moment ago, wishing him nothing but the best. Maybe just a change of scenery is all he needed. I mean, he was heavily recruited, highly touted, 5-star, who just never really seemed to put it all together for Ohio State. And who knows, maybe it was just kind of that lack of confidence while he was at Ohio State that just continued to hold him back, and maybe going to a completely different environment with different expectations, maybe he'll be able to become close to the player that Ohio State fans thought that they were getting when he signed with the Buckeyes.
Yeah, he can be the Brendan White of Nebraska.
Not a bad person to try and emulate in terms of a second stage of a career.
Yeah, so Tyreek Johnson off to Nebraska, where he will become a Buckeye opponent. Speaking of Buckeye opponents, the Buckeyes, Chip, offered a graduate transfer wide receiver, Dalen Baldwin. They offered him. He was in the transfer portal. He's out of Jackson State. He committed to Michigan over Ohio State. So another opponent that Ohio State was at least interested in, and you'd have to think the only reason. Well, there's two possible reasons, I think. One is, you don't want to put a lot of stress and strain on a very young receiving core behind the incumbents, Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. But also, if you get Dalen Baldwin, then he doesn't go to Michigan.
True. And one of the other factors that it's underrated, but I think it probably played a part. From what I understand, he is a native of the state of Michigan. So, when you think about all the talent that is in that room, I mean, we talked earlier, in previous podcasts about people, Jameson Williams, for example, transferring to Alabama, and hopefully that Brian Hartline and Ryan Day and the offensive coaching staff are going to do their very best to rotate the wide receivers beyond Chris Olave, beyond Garrett Wilson, with so much talent that's in that room. I was kind of surprised that they extended the offer, but maybe, like I said, I mean, maybe he saw the depth chart, maybe the fact that he's from Michigan kind of also weighed in his thought process when he decided to go to play for that team up north.
Do you know where in Michigan Dalen Baldwin is from?
I'm not entirely aware. I just happened to see something on Twitter that when Baldwin committed to the Wolverines over Ohio State, that he is from that state. And so, like I said, I think without knowing off the top of my head the depth chart of the Wolverines, I mean, obviously Ronnie Bell is coming back. That, you know, Baldwin, he may look and see. I mean, we've talked about him already. Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, they're back. And as Ohio State fans, there's, I don't want to say concern, but curiosity, I think would be a better term to kind of speculate how much rotation is going to be within that wide receiver room. Maybe he saw the depth chart. Maybe he figured, hey, I can possibly come in and immediately contribute, whereas I'm not necessarily sure what level of playing time I'm going to be able to get, especially as a transfer into a very talented wide receiver room.
Chip, I wasn't trying to put you on the spot asking you where in Michigan he's from. That was a setup. It was just setting you up because I wanted to tell you, and I really, really want to emphasize this, that I don't give a damn for the whole state of Michigan.
See, you could have said that right from the onset, though. You could have, you know, instead of trying to set me up, you could have just spoke your heart. You know, spoke, you know, say what's on your mind, Michael. Don't hold back.
Chip, you're the straight man. That's how this works. I get a straight response from you, and then I drop the joke in. I don't know. We've been doing this too long. You got to help me out here. All right.
I get you.
Let us move on from the transfer portal, which doesn't seem to be a fun thing for Ohio State right now, but we will move on to former Buckeyes that are now getting paid. And that is to say that several of the Ohio State drafted players in the NFL have signed contracts. They are going to make money. They've already made signing bonuses, presumably, and whatnot. Tommy Togiai with the Browns, Luke Farrell with the Jags, Pete Werner with the Saints, and of course, Justin Fields with the Bears, a 4-year, $18.9 million contract. It's nice to see these guys sign on the dotted line.
Well, the thing about every one of those players, I mean, I'm obviously Justin Fields is going to get the eye-popping contract just because, you know, being the lone first rounder of all those players that you just rattled off. But the nice thing for all these players, maybe not necessarily as lucrative as Justin Fields, but I think all of them have certain signing bonuses that are, you know, part of, you know, that are part of like their guaranteed rookie contracts. And I can only hope that each and every one of them not only has a good financial advisors, but that they're going to, you know, not necessarily splurge on. I have no problem with them getting a nice car, you know, maybe kind of sprucing up their wardrobe or anything like that. But you know, being financially responsible, because, you know, it's the kind of thing I always think of Kirk Barton, the trials and tribulations of Kirk Barton when he was a rookie, of all the different apartments that he signed leases in and all the challenges that he had. That's the first person I would put on speed dial to talk to any Buckeye needs to talk to Kirk Barton about what to do and as it relates to rental properties when you're a rookie in the NFL.
Yeah, my first purchase is that Ferrari, because who knows when you're going to be able to get that Ferrari again.
And I'm sure it would really serve you well down there in Florida. You know, kind of, you know, you could relive your glory days of being Don Johnson and all that kind of stuff. But in all seriousness, I'm hoping that Justin Fields might be a little more practical considering he's going to be in an environment that, a Ferrari might not necessarily be the most practical vehicle when the snow starts to fall in the streets of Chicago. Maybe something with a little more four-wheel drive.
Yeah, well, when you have that kind of money, you don't have to drive yourself when the weather sucks. You can make someone else do that.
There you go. Absolutely.
Speaking of former Buckeyes signing some contracts, Jerome Baker has signed a contract extension with the Miami Dolphins. That is a 3-year extension, reportedly worth $39 million. $28.4 million is guaranteed, according to agent Drew Rosenhaus. That's the kind of money I want with my next job.
I certainly wouldn't turn it down. I guess I'm going to ask you as the Miami Dolphins fan, because I know that there was a lot of, I don't want to say concern about Jerome Baker when he played at Ohio State. It seemed as though he played better like when when he was at Ohio State, maybe as a sophomore, then, his junior year. And then do you think that he's certainly, I'm not asking you if he's worth the contract, but do you think that he's playing better in the NFL than he did at Ohio State? Because that seems to be kind of the consensus thought on Twitter as it relates to the news of this contract.
Yeah, I think Brian Flores is using him well, and I think that he does some things well. He's really effective when they let him rush the passer. I think he's really good at that. He seems to come up with turnovers more than other players on the defense. So I mean, I think there's been some production there. I'm certainly happy to have him 3 more years as a fan of the Dolphins, and it's good to see. I thought, and you thought, because we talked about this, he had a lot of potential, a lot of athletic ability, but it didn't seem like he was really getting anywhere his last couple of years with the Buckeyes. And I'm not saying that he was protecting his his financial future or anything, but I mean, maybe he just wasn't as motivated, or I don't know. I really don't know what it was about him, but he had the talent to be much more than what he was in college, and I think he's showing more of that at the professional level.
And better than I do, just being closer to the situation and being a fan of the Dolphins, I think Brian Flores being a defensive coach, prior to becoming the head coach of Miami, I think that kind of that creativity and flexibility of Jerome Baker. I mean, he's so athletic, so that being able to put him in positions where he can freely run to the ball, rush the pass, or do whatever. I'm not saying that he didn't have those kind of abilities at Ohio State, but it certainly seemed as though that last year and again, I'm not saying that, like you, I'm not saying that he didn't put the effort in, but it seemed like something was missing, hence he fell to the second round. And I think Miami is certainly rewarding him for what they have seen during his first years as a Dolphin and what they want to see for the next 3 years as a Dolphin.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that when you watch Dolphins games, there's always a highlight with him in it. There's always at least one standout moment that he's had in a game, and he could be a little bit more consistent in certain aspects of his game, but I think he's shown to be a valuable player for the defense. And this team the Dolphins have traded away a lot of players that I liked, and kept players that I maybe didn't like at times. So it's good to see him having had some success, them locking him down, because it just seems like players are disposable at that particular stop in the NFL. But Brian Flores, I think, is building something. I think it's looking a little better, from year to year, and they have to make that next step. And really, that all comes down to fixing some of the holes on the defensive side, which Baker helps out with that, and getting some quarterback play, which Tua he was drafted to do that.
Considering how much draft capital Miami has, for the foreseeable future in terms of some of the moves that they've made, and they had a good draft this past April. We're talking about, when it comes to some of the young talent. I know you just rattled off, Tua at the quarterback position, but being able to not only select the right talent, but hopefully develop it. I look at the contract extension that Jerome Baker is signing as evidence of they believe that he is one of the building blocks that they want to construct around as they try to take, further steps to being more competitive within their division. When you talk about Buffalo being a playoff team, New England is kind of in a transition mode ever since the departure of Tom Brady. And I know New England spent heavy this past offseason on veteran free agents, and they drafted a quarterback. I think Miami's just trying to keep pace, with their young talent and trying to cultivate and develop it. And I think that they look at Jerome Baker as being one of those building blocks that they want to have around as they try to keep up the pace with Buffalo and New England.
Yeah, I agree. I think that this contract extension shows that he is that piece. He's that building block. He's one of the guys that's going to be the core of the team, or that they look to be the core of the team. They're reportedly they're, Xavier Howard is going to be next, and he certainly is a guy that, when there was all this talk about trading maybe for Deshaun Watson before, all the stuff came out in the news that, unsavory stuff that we'd been reading about and people have been talking about, and he was just not happy being in Houston, and there was a lot of talk about Xavier Howard being involved in that trade, and I said that's the absolute one lone guy on the entire team you cannot put in that trade, because he's a game-changing type player. He is a ball-hawking cornerback that he gets you extra possessions. And it might not even be the guy he's covering. It might be some other guy that he comes off his guy and makes the interception. That's the kind of player he is, and you can't have a guy like that and give him away, even if you're getting a top, quarterback. I think you have to keep those types of players. So I think Miami looks like they're a little smarter now with Brian Flores in place, and hopefully they will continue to trend upward. But we'll see. Jerome Baker will have to be a part of that if they are doing it, because he's locked down for 3 more years.
Well, maybe Jerome Baker will listen to this podcast and say, Michael needs a new Ferrari to tool around in Florida. I've got some spare change. I can make that happen.
Yeah, I wouldn't even need a Ferrari. I mean, I'm not that greedy. I could be, Corvette.
There you go. As long as we keep our our desires modest.
Yeah.
I'm sure Jerome could help you out.
Absolutely. I'm here to help you, Jerome. I'll make it easier for you. A little easier on the wallet. Anyway, so lots of NFL stuff there that we just talked about, and of course the transfer portal stuff that we discussed earlier. We still have a few topics that we want to get to, Chip, that involve the college football landscape, and also some more stuff to talk about in relation to the 2021 Ohio State football season. And we'll get to those issues and those topics right after this. And we're back, Chip, and I think it's time to talk a little bit about the Ohio State University 2021 football schedule for the Buckeyes. We now know the kickoff times for 5 games this fall.
And that's always a nice thing when you're planning out your weekend. I know, you're Mr. Nightlight anyway, in terms of, like you're out, and up watching, like Hawaii until until, as the clock goes into early Sunday morning. But yeah, for the rest of us who like to plan their weekends around when Ohio State is kicking off, it's nice to know we've got at least 5 of them down, 7 to go.
Yeah, I don't know what I would do if there were some universities in Japan that started after the Hawaii game. I would probably stay up even longer.
You might just, yeah, like I said, man, you just might be running on fumes. I don't know.
I
More
always
power
am.
to you.
That's
More
that's
power
my
to you.
that's my default setting is running on fumes. So we already knew some of these, Chip, but it looks to me like here's what we've got. We know the Minnesota game on Thursday, the 2nd of September, will start at 8 p.m. That is a Fox game. We know that the Saturday, September 11th game against Oregon will be a big noon kickoff. And we know Tulsa will be a 3:30 start time. We don't know Akron or Rutgers yet. We know Maryland will be also a noon game in Columbus. We don't know Indiana yet, or Penn State, or Nebraska, or Purdue, or Michigan State, but we, of course, know the game is going to be a big noon Saturday.
I will say this, I mean, we talked about this before. This is just my opinion. I personally, I'm not angry. I'm not disappointed. I'm surprised that the Minnesota game, the kickoff, we knew it was going to be obviously a Thursday night game. That that date had been set for a couple of years now. I'm surprised it's an 8:00 kickoff versus a 7 p.m. kickoff, simply because of the fact that the next day being a Friday. Now, granted, some people might be taking that Friday off anyway, but the fact that people will be working, I just thought that, especially in the Columbus, Cleveland, Cincinnati, just the great state of Ohio, that a lot of people, having with an 8:00 kickoff, you're looking, closer to, let's just say, like closer to midnight by the time that game is done, especially the way the Fox with all their commercials. So
right, but the problem is it's in a different time zone. So if you shift this to 7 Eastern, then the people in Minnesota are having to get off work early, leave work early to get home or get to the stadium to see what would be a 6:00 kickoff for them.
Very good point. Very good point. And again, it is Labor Day weekend. Some people, try to, I'm not saying I'm one of them, but in the past, being able to possibly take that Friday off to kind of give myself an even longer Labor Day weekend. Nothing wrong with that. I know I'll be looking forward to watching the game, put it that way, no matter what time it kicks off.
Yeah, I mean, I'm for taking as many days off as you can take off.
Well, certainly. I mean,
take all the days off.
Certainly, yeah. Well, I mean, it's one of these things where the whole, at Minnesota, this is the first time. I mean, I know we'll talk about it in greater detail as it gets closer and closer to that game. This is the first time that Ohio State is playing at Minnesota since that 2014 game that was in November of that championship year, when it was, I think, minus 20 below wind chill.
The Dilly Bar game.
The Dilly Bar game and the JT Barrett lengthy touchdown run.
Yeah, the runaway lawnmower game.
Exactly. So I'm sure that, yes, it might get a little cooler, but the people who are fortunate enough to go to that game to cheer on the Buckeyes, unless some kind of drastically unforeseen meteorological event takes place, you're not going to have minus 20 in Minnesota on the night of September 2nd.
It's probably cheaper to go see a game at Minnesota than at Ohio Stadium. So since there was no Ohio State home games last year that were open to the public, I would think a lot of people would want to buy a ticket and go take a road trip to Minneapolis.
That might, I have not yet had the opportunity to see that stadium, but I've heard it's beautiful. And it's certainly, considering it's It's not that old. I mean, I think the stadium is only about 10 years old. So I
Hmm.
mean, it certainly would be, again, like you said, considering it's Labor Day weekend and the fact that fans are going to be in the stands for the first time in well over a year. I think you're absolutely right. I think this would be certainly a worthwhile trip to make.
Are you surprised the Maryland game got a noon start?
A little. The fact that I just kind of, when you look at, uh, I mean, I'm thinking that Maryland, the fact that it was announced as a noon game, but they haven't announced which television partner is going to be televising it. That seems kind of odd. So that kind of, I'm wondering if it's going to be ABC or ESPN. Uh,
Hmm.
but just simply because the fact that, yeah, I mean, considering it's you're talking, relatively still early in the season, Maryland. Um, I'm sure that they probably, Maryland last year with everything that happened COVID wise, they put a licking on Penn State last year. So it would have been interesting to see what kind of team Maryland would have had last year against Ohio State. Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that that's a noon kickoff.
Yeah, and of course there's a bunch we don't know yet. This Akron game could be like a weird like 6:20 game because no one cares about this game.
No, if there was a game, and maybe circumstances have changed with regards to the contracts. I know that there are so many games that Ohio State is obligated to be on the Big Ten network. If there was a game that I think you could almost put in ink that's going to be a BTN game, I think this is it. You might be right. This might be one of those weird kickoff times on Big Ten network to fulfill Ohio State's requirements to the Big Ten network. And then who's to say that later on, in terms of like maybe when they go to Rutgers or, just looking at, possibly when they go to Nebraska, if that's not another, Big Ten network game when Ohio State's on the road. Who knows?
I'm gonna call I'm gonna call Rutgers night game BTN. I'm gonna call that October 2nd.
Okay. That would not be surprising. It really wouldn't. If you were to tell me that Akron is going to be on the Big Ten network, like you said, at a crazy kickoff time, and then the following week Ohio State is on the road at Rutgers on BTN at night, would not be surprising to me whatsoever.
Yeah, and I'm totally flying blind. I haven't looked at any of the other teams' schedules. So, but it just feels like a Rutgers game on the road is a nighttime BTN game. It just feels like a nighttime BTN game.
Well, when you think about, as arrogantly as this sounds, Ohio State being such a big draw whenever they come into town, and I think that Rutgers is certainly on an improved trajectory than where they have been. It wouldn't be surprised. Now, granted, they're going to be improved. I wouldn't necessarily say that they're going to be in bowl contention, but stranger things have happened. Why
Right.
not? Why not put them on at night on Big Ten Network to try and garner as much of, like you're gonna Ohio State fans are gonna watch it no matter what time. And with Rutgers, like trying to bring as much attention, having it on at night, that makes complete sense to me.
Yeah, I think that could happen. All right, we'll get some more of those times to you when they come in. Of course, you know we're only on every 2 weeks. We're not breaking any news here, but we like to talk about it. Let's turn our attention to some of the national stuff, Chip. There's a couple of topics I know you want to just talk about near and dear to your heart, and one of those is something that I don't think anybody can really say with any certainty what's going to happen, and that is, of course, the hot topic, or one of the hot topics, and that is the name, image, and likeness legislation that's going on. How is the NCAA going to implement it? I don't know what's going to happen with this. There's so many weird, um, you know, things that you have to think about to make this thing fair. And I think that it's going to be. I think it's going to be fraught with weird loopholes for a couple of years until they figure out, you know, sort of how to dial it in.
Well, I mean, like you said, there's still so much vagueness around this. Just to kind of put this in context, um, the last time that you and I spoke, this was, obviously, name, image, and likeness has been on the back burner of college football conversation for a while now. But the last time that we spoke, there wasn't anything necessarily in terms of pen to paper about what this would entail. Now, a state senator from Miamisburg, I'm going to probably butcher this individual's name unintentionally. State Senator Niraj Antani, he worked with Gene Smith. And here's something that I think might be of comfort to you and to our listeners is not only with Gene Smith kind of working on what this legislation would entail, that Antani also had conversations with former Ohio State head coach and current Youngstown State president, Jim Tressel, about what the legislation, what it would basically entail. So the idea behind it is, when it comes to, like the name, image, and likeness, there's a lot of, like you said, a lot of loopholes that I think are going to be existing in this for the time being. But it's supposed to be, one of these things where, by and large, any of the athletes who would be impacted, it's not necessarily just exclusively for football. This could be any of the sports across the board where they would be able to get some kind of an endorsement deal. And, one of the things that Intani made a really strong emphasis is that by and large, like not every athlete is going to have the, I guess you could say the cachet, for lack of a better word,
The opportunities, I think.
Yeah,
Your right guard is not going to get the opportunities that your starting quarterback's getting.
Precisely. Like, Antani said, like the idea of somebody getting a Nike deal or a Coke endorsement or anything, that's not basically that's not very likely. However, and this is where, when you think about, some of the different things is a lot of these, like you said, let's just use the example you just inadvertently kind of casually tossed out there is, okay, your right guard. All right. If there was an opportunity for the right guard who, regardless of whether he's from Ohio or from Florida or wherever, that let's say that they have a local high school football camp in their hometown and they wanted to have, okay, like come get the autograph of Ohio State's starting right guard at this football camp, those kind of things, that's what this would allow. Like these kind of,
Right.
It could be, you could capitalize on things at the local level. And like I often, I'm just going to use an example off the top of my head, like not that he needs any more money and he certainly doesn't need any more notoriety because he's already in the Hall of Fame. But you and I both remember how Orlando Pace, when he was playing at Ohio State, how they came up with the idea of like those pancake magnets when they were trying to, popularize him as a Heisman Trophy. Can you imagine what it would have been like 25 years ago? Come to the IHOP for the Orlando Pace pancake stack. And like some of the things that people are prohibited with, like this is, again, just off the top of my head, is like with Braxton Miller, and I feel comfortable using former players' names just because I know that they're not going to get in trouble. But like any of the beer distributors around Columbus, how great would it have been for Braxton Miller if it had been allowed, of course, like for him to be able to be signing beer posters with, it's Miller time. Now, granted, part of this legislation is you're not allowed to do anything that involves alcohol or
Right.
anything,
It's
like there's,
tobacco,
yep,
gambling,
you got it.
that kind of thing.
Yeah. So it's like, it's going to be interesting to see, any of the opportunities that people are going to have, regardless of the sport. Like I'm already thinking, and I'm just going to use the term that they use very lovingly, how they refer to themselves, the offensive linemen at Ohio State, how they refer to themselves as the slobs. Okay. Like you're going to tell me that there isn't some restaurant that says, hey, come here on Wednesday night to eat and meet the slobs. You know what I
Old
mean?
like
Like,
a old country buffet or something.
there you go. Yeah.
Does that
Come
place
eat
still
like
exist?
it's something, come eat like a slob. Come meet the slobs, or something. And that's kind of where it's like you have the opportunity to kind of, for a lot of these players that are not necessarily at, like you said, the starting quarterback kind of name recognition opportunities. However, hey, it'd be great to have autograph signings, or I'll throw another scenario out at you that I think, you and I, can appreciate this, because I know you and I both have the same mutual respect for this person, and that is with jersey sales. Specifically, like I was going to use Chris Spielman as an example. And
Hmm.
I'm not sure if you, again, he doesn't necessarily need the money or the recognition. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, that Ohio State says that, all right, you can go into any of the various places that sell jerseys and get one custom made. But guess what? You're not allowed to put the name of any former or current player on the back of that jersey. So, and because trust me when I say that I tried, like to try and custom make a 36 Spielman jersey before, and I thought, I'm not going to put my name on it. That people are like, I don't know any Minnich playing playing for Ohio State. That's why I want that number. I wanted Spielman on the back. I
Right.
don't think there's any reason why, I don't care what the sport is, why you can't buy a jersey, and this could be women's, basketball, softball, uh, lacrosse, whatever. If you wanted to be able to buy a jersey and put the player's name on it, and then that player gets a cut of the proceeds, I don't see any reason why that would be an issue. Or it shouldn't be an issue.
Right. And it shouldn't have been that way. I mean, you and I remember used to be able to get a customized jersey with anybody's name and number on it you wanted, and then they started to go to that. Oh, we're just going to sell number one, and
Right.
that kind of thing. And you're saying you can't get a jersey made with Spielman and 36, and I say, yeah, but if you look in the stands, and every time they talk about a player's family, what are they wearing? They're wearing the player's number and the player's name, and guess what? They're not all the same size as that player.
Precisely.
So,
And yeah, I mean, it's gonna be interesting. I mean, like it's one of these things where, again, going back to the idea of, what people are going to do. Like I know that we were just kind of tossing out the idea of, certain restaurants or football camps or autograph signings or whatever it might be, is that even with this proposed bill, is any of the contracts that the student wants to sign and participate in, it needs to be it has to be approved at least 15 days before the student intends to enter into that contract. So there's going to be oversight. And here's the other thing that I think is kind of interesting, is that you and I, we're recording this. We're just going to say it's the middle of June. I mean, kind of splitting hairs here, but it's the middle of June. When this legislation was proposed, it was intended with the idea of getting this signed and passed into law for July 1st. So I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. I know that the NCAA could possibly swoop in and propose something, which is kind of what I think a lot of the states are kind of hoping, for something, or for the federal government to kind of come up with some. I know that former Ohio State player and current member of the House of Representatives, Anthony Gonzalez, has unveiled legislation. I think that there's a secret hope that somebody comes up with something to address this issue. But, if anything, the great thing about this movement, if you will, is athletes are finally going to start to be able to capitalize on their name, image, and likeness in some way, shape, or form.
Right. Now, and I've long thought that there should be organized, autograph signings, and there should be an avenue for kids to go home in the off season and hold a football camp, with their name on it, because this is the sweat of their toils, and they're entitled to it. And instead of all the shady stuff that we've had for years. I mean, Johnny Manziel just came out and talked about all the thousands of dollars he made at autograph signings in some hotel. They'd just rent a motel room somewhere, and he'd sit in there and sign stuff and make thousands of dollars, which is a surprise to nobody, except for maybe the internal investigation into Johnny Manziel that turned up nothing. But it's just is stupid, when these kids can't, because of the demand on their time, both from academics and from the athletic demands on their time. They can't hold a job. They can't go out and make a little extra money. And these universities are making billions and billions of dollars off of what they're doing. And it has always smelled a little fishy, quite frankly. And it's about time that these things started to move. But there are so many little things that you have to look at. You have to look at the fact that you need it to be fair for everybody. You need it to be something, hopefully, that can take care of the non-revenue kids as well, non-revenue sport kids. It's got to be equitable in some way. There has to be some fairness behind it, and it has to be monitored, and it has to be probably capped, because there's a big difference between what the starting quarterback at Ohio State would be able to earn, and the starting quarterback at, say, I don't know, Mercer.
Well, since you brought that up, and we talked about this earlier in the podcast as it related to recruiting, it's certainly, name, image, and likeness is certainly being part of the conversations that Ohio State coaches are having with the prospects that they're coming through, either on official or unofficial visits. And you're right. I mean, the starting quarterback at Ohio State is certainly going to be making more than the starting quarterback at Mercer. And I'm not sure if you had the opportunity, but on one of the Buckeye Morning Scoop sessions that Tom Orr had, one of his guests, a gentleman by the name of Matt Brown, and Matt Brown's very well versed and connected with kind of what's going on as it relates to this whole movement.
I know Matt from Extra Points.
There you go.
Yep.
You got it. So, Matt Brown has basically come out and said, he thinks Ohio State, in so many words, basically helped write this bill. So I think it will pass the smell test in terms of what is permissible and what you can and cannot do. And Matt Brown also believes, as I said a few moments ago, that this is going to benefit not just the football team, even though they're going to be probably considered, let's just give more money to the football team. That I think a lot of the women's sports, a lot of the Olympic sports, that a lot of these athletes who, again, they don't get nearly the same kind of fame and notoriety as Ohio State's football players do, but they put in just as much time and effort into their respective sports. And like you said, being able to capitalize on that, to be able to, regardless of, like you said, have design autograph sessions, or being able to sell jerseys with their name and number on it.
Mm-hmm.
I think they are going to be probably some of the largest and well-deserved recipients of NIL legislation when it eventually comes to pass.
Yeah, I mean, how cool would it be to go someplace like, I don't know, like St. John Arena, and everybody's, the basketball team is all, they got players at various tables, and you can go get in line and get your favorite Buckeye basketball player's autograph and that kind of thing. I mean, it's the kind of stuff that you don't really typically get to do unless you just kind of catch them out randomly, or you wait until they're done and they've graduated, and then they go to a bookstore or do something. It's something that is, I think, will connect the fans and the players even more, and I think it'll help the players, and I think it's going to be, once they get all the kinks worked out, I think it's going to be a good thing in the end. And I think the first thing that the NCAA should do when they say, okay, we're all systems go, we've got these standards in place, we now know how we're going to handle name, image, and likeness situation. We're going to get the players a little bit of money, and now, because we're going to set this all in motion, the first thing we have to do is apologize to Jim Tressel and to the players who sold their own gear to pay for tattoos, because that would never happen in a million years under this new system, and the fact that the system didn't exist is the only reason that something like that would have happened.
And you're absolutely right. I mean, because that was about 10 years ago that Coach Tressel was forced to resign over something as ludicrous as this issue. So, yeah, you can only hope that, I mean, it's unfortunate that Jim Tressel lost his dream job, and I'm certainly happy that he's doing very well for himself and is doing well for the students at Youngstown State. But, yeah, I mean, to be forced out over such a foolish, I mean, just inane idea that, okay, how dare you be able to sell your own property? Like I just, again, like, I think you're right. I think an apology to Jim Tressel, as well as the players who were impacted, is certainly well within order.
Right. And it's not even that they couldn't, it's like you could sell them. You just have to wait 2 more years to sell them. It's like, it's insane. And and yeah, Jim Tressel didn't have to lie to the NCAA, but, I'm not going to fault a guy for sticking up for his kids and not wanting them to get in trouble over something as ridiculous as that. So yeah, it's reinstate the wins and get rid of all the vacated games, and apologize and say, hey, look, we are more enlightened now. We're enlightened, and we know what we're doing now, and things are better, and that's how you progress.
I completely agree.
All right, Chip, one more thing that we want to talk about before we get out of here this week is the what really seemed to kind of come out of left field. It's something that everybody in college football has been talking about for years, but the NCAA itself wasn't talking about it. And now we've got discussion and potentially some movement coming on the playoff, the college football playoff. And we've heard a proposal, a 12-team proposal, Chip.
And I don't know how you felt about that. I was surprised. I will freely admit, I have a copy of the book Death to the BCS by Dan Wetzel downstairs in my basement. Like, I used to be an advocate of, okay, if you win your conference championship, you should be in the playoffs. So I was always, okay, the MAC, like the American, whatever it might be. I used to be like that. And then I started to think, it's not going to work. So I was more in that camp of 8. But as I've seen the details around this proposal, I'm on board with the 12-team playoff. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah. I was surprised it went straight to 12 and didn't go jump to 8 first. Or even 6. I could have even seen 6-team playoff with 2 teams getting a bye. I could have even seen that coming. Um, but yeah, to jump from 4 to 12 like that immediately was very surprising. And it's interesting some of the things that have come out of this. I was interested in the Notre Dame talk because they're not really in a conference, and there was talk that if they would not be eligible for a bye because they are not technically um, able to win their conference because they're not really in a conference. So they're just kind of like ACC adjacent at this point. And it seemed to me to possibly be I don't know if it's an attempt for the NCAA to sort of force Notre Dame's hand into joining a conference, or if that's just hey, we're going to take care of our conferences first, and you're more than welcome to continue doing what you're doing, or you can do this other thing.
Well, this is just my personal opinion. Jack Swarbrick is Notre Dame's athletic director, and he was heavily involved in this proposal. So I'm of the maybe I'm mistaken. I I believe that Notre Dame, since they truly cherish and value their independence, that Swarbrick, he's taking the position that he doesn't care that they are that Notre Dame could not necessarily ever get a bye. Like the proposal
Uh-huh.
where like the first 4 teams get a bye. He doesn't even care about that. I think what he's banking on, and this is part of why I'm unhappy with what is currently in the proposal, is that I think he's banking on Notre Dame being good enough year in year out to be in that 5 to 12, but specifically that 5 to 8 range, where you get to host a playoff game at your home stadium.
Uh-huh.
I think in their mind, because he kind of supposedly said something along the lines of, "I'll never have to hear anything about the missing data point again." The fact that Notre Dame is never playing in the conference championship game. He doesn't care about that. He's more concerned about, okay, I get to pack the field at Notre Dame in December with some team. He doesn't even care who it is, but some team at Notre Dame Stadium in December as a home game. I think that's where he's coming off thinking, I don't really care about the fact that I'm not playing in a conference championship game and I don't get a bye. I mean, like when you look at the calendar, and
Uh-huh.
I'm going to use this year as an example. I realize it's not set up, but like if I'm not mistaken, it would be like the Big Ten championship and the SEC championship is December 4th. So it would be, I think like the weekend maybe of December 18th. That would be the first round of the playoffs. If that, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's like a couple weeks after the conference championship games. Think about this: is that Notre Dame, they're well rested. They have not played since the last weekend in November. They get to possibly play at home. Versus if you're playing in a conference championship game, Ohio State, they've been winning their conference championship, but they haven't necessarily been coming out, with the exception of in 2014 when they obliterated Wisconsin 59-0. Most of the time, Ohio State in the Big Ten championship, they're not necessarily looking as nearly as potent as they have, throughout the season. Because I think I don't want to say tired, but they're playing against a quality opponent, usually a physical opponent in Wisconsin. I don't know. I just think, to me, I think the idea of necessarily playing in a conference championship game and then 2 weeks later having to play the first round playoff game, might be a little tough.
Yeah, well, the thing about Notre Dame though is that they would just end up getting embarrassed by UCF or Cincinnati at home instead of getting embarrassed in the next game that they play in, because they've been I think marginally better than Oklahoma, I guess, when they've made the playoff, but yeah, still not impressing anybody.
But they'll get to be embarrassed at home and keep that money. I
Yeah.
think, unlike, or at least let me rephrase that. I think if they don't necessarily get to keep the gate receipts, the local businesses of South Bend, all the bars and, the people that are tailgating and the hotels and all of that, it's a nice boon for those local economies, which is that's my biggest gripe. And I couldn't believe the arrogance of Bob Bowlesby acting like, oh, people can just watch it, if they don't want to go to the quarterfinals at the bowl sites, they could just watch it on their television. I've got news for Bob Bowlesby. Guess what? You're gonna get exactly what you want, man, because people are not going to be able to shell out money for a conference championship game, then go to, potentially 3 bowl site locations. It's not happening.
No,
So that's the one thing that has to change.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't even afford to go to national championship game by itself. Like I can't imagine going to all of those games. I mean, because the national championship game tickets are ridiculous. They sell out quickly, and then you have to buy them on a secondary market for 3 times of that. So, yeah, I mean, I always felt like growing up that they needed to have a tournament, a playoff with, and I wanted the Bulls to be involved in that, and I wanted it to be. I always thought that the granddaddy of them all should be the national championship game. Like, you play your way through the bowl system in the playoffs to get to the Rose Bowl and play for the national championship. That's, of course, I'm sure that kids in the South probably looked at that maybe like as the Sugar Bowl or the Orange Bowl being that game, but and that could rotate as well. But and they've done that to some extent. They've sort of involved the bowls in that setup. But I don't want the Bulls to suffer. I don't like the idea of if you get eliminated, you can still go play in a bowl game. That thing was floating around out there. I heard that one. Were you hearing that one too?
Yes. And just to kind of, I don't know, maybe put you at ease, is I was going to compliment you in the sense that great minds think alike. And that is Joel Klatt, who you and I and our listeners should be familiar with, because he's often, as with Gus Johnson on Fox telecasts, especially of Ohio State in recent years. Joel Klatt tonight on Twitter, before we started recording the podcast, he advocated the exact same thing that you did, is that in his humble opinion, the Rose Bowl should be the national championship.
Oh, no kidding.
Site. Yeah. So, I mean, so you're okay. So you're thinking, your thinking is clear and brilliant as usual. But in all seriousness, I think this is the kind of thing where you and I may have a difference of opinion is as much as I like the bowl games, as much as I like them, I just think that it's kind of, by and large, like this idea that like the Bob Bowlesbys and the other people who are trying to advocate for the Bulls, I think I'm more inclined to agree with, I think it was, Roger Sherman of The Ringer, who's saying like maybe the Bulls are obsolete, that it's that maybe they're, like with this playoff system, because you see it, all the bowl games as a result of the 14 playoff, their attendance, the interest by the players has dramatically cut down. I mean, you have players saying,
sure.
I'm not gonna go play in the
they opt out. Yeah,
because I can't blame them.
Yeah.
I can't blame why. What it's like when you and I have both seen players, not necessarily even for Ohio State, who going into I don't want to say a meaningless bowl game, but a bowl game that does not have any impact on the national championship because they weren't part of the playoff, get hurt, and then their draft stock dramatically suffers. So that's why it's like I had no problem with Denzel Ward a few years ago. I know a lot of Ohio State fans weren't happy about it, but I understood. He was like, okay, I'm going to be a high, which he was, the 4th overall pick the year he came out. Why risk future millions for a game that has no bearing on the national championship? I think getting back to the whole idea of, fans will pay to go. No, they won't. But fans would love to be a part of on campus the fact that and I'm just kind of Andy Staples of the Athletic again before we were recording. I saw on Twitter that I guess an athletic director, he didn't name names, is saying that this unnamed athletic director is strongly advocating that not only the games that are seeded for 5 through 12, but then the quarterfinals are that they're both on campus. Like that it just by and large when it comes to think of it, the way that this athletic director put it is if you're Gene Smith, and I'm not Gene Smith, I want to make it abundantly clear this is not the athletic director he's talking to, but if you're Gene Smith and you're selling Ohio State season tickets, part of your season ticket package could be that you get to like you get first dibs on home playoff games in Ohio Stadium in December.
Right. Now,
Think
I
about
don't
how much
mind
money that
that.
is.
I don't mind that, but here's the thing: is if you're going to make those games be, um, if you're going to have those games, Chip, that are going to be on campus, and you want to make sure that people still have money to go and follow the team in their next stop, I think you got to. I think you got to price that at the same price that you price your other home games. And I know there's premium games, there's games that are more than others, but for example, whatever you're charging for the Michigan game, that's don't go over that for your quarterfinal game. You have to keep it reasonable.
Oh, sure.
It's already ridiculous. I mean, Ohio State home football game prices are ridiculous.
I'm not. Hey man, you and I, we are of a similar mindset. I'm not advocating gouging by any stretch. I'm simply making the point that as well as I do that even if the game, okay, like let's say like because I know that the Michigan game, when it's at home is like $200, and I
Right.
completely agree with you that like the other ticket
That's
prices
four
for
times what I paid as a student for
I
my entire
I'm
my
sure.
entire season.
I have no doubt. I have no doubt. I have no doubt. But I'm just saying, like with the tiered pricing that they're doing nowadays, it's around $200. That being said, to me, the likelihood of not only Ohio State selling out Ohio Stadium as well as like in my dream scenario, some SEC team that is like they're huddled around their heated benches because it's 40 degrees in Columbus in the middle of December. But you know as well as I do that like the I mean like the surrounding tailgate outside of Ohio Stadium, the varsity club, I mean the outer end, I mean just jam packed. And I would rather
Yeah.
see and this could be and I'm going to go and say I would feel as passionately about this as if the situation was reversed and Ohio State was going on the road to Alabama or Georgia or Florida for the for the quarterfinals. I really would. I think it's that important that you have the first round and the quarterfinals on campus, and then as far as the other bowls that we're talking about, the Rose, the Sugar, the Fiesta, the Orange, and again, I'm sure this would not be fun to be part of these negotiations. This is where when you start to make the determinations in terms of okay, which are going to be the semifinals and who's going to get to host the national championship game. Because I think that's how you keep them happy. Not that I don't think that that's necessarily crucial, but I think if you're trying to maintain those kind of relationships, all right, I could see it the way that they've been doing it with the semifinals and the national championship game, doing it that way. That's what I would just prefer the first round and the quarterfinals for sure on campus. And again, that's kind of where this athletic director was advocating to Andy Staples. It's what Joel Klatt was also advocating, in addition to the fact that he wants the Rose Bowl to be the national championship game always.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you and I are largely on the same page. When I actually had filled out I don't know how many pages of notebooks when I was bored in study hall or whatever with this is exactly how it would work. You would get these teams from these conferences, they would go to these games, and I had it all figured out. And I would tweak it and I would update it and I would say, okay, now there's this new bowl game. I have to add this and I have to figure out this out. Um, yeah, it's not practical to do every round of a multi-step playoff, but I thought if it was 8, it was doable within the bowl system. Um, this thing that they're talking about, I don't think is, and I have no problem having the first, um, the first round on campus. Like you, I would love to see some of these southern teams have to come up and play in the cold sometimes, and see how that goes. But the the thing about the Bulls that's sad is, you said maybe they're obsolete, and maybe they are. I think there's got to be a way to incentivize those again, like a new way. It's got to have to be something new, and maybe that goes into the whole, getting back to name, image, likeness, or getting back into letting players earn. Maybe there's some way to tie bowl games into that. Maybe the winner gets $1,000 each for the winner, or whatever, or something. I'm just throwing that out there. This is just smarter people than me can figure out what that would be. But there has to be some kind of incentivization once again to get if you want to keep the bowl games, to having them. And I know a lot of people complain and say, oh, there's too many bowl games, but then I see these same people watching every week, watching the Holiday Bowl and watching the Armed Forces Bowl and the Bell Helicopter Bowl, and the same people that complain about them sit and watch them and talk about them. So I think they're compelling. I think anybody that likes college football likes them. I think it's Tom Moore that always says more college football is better than less college football. So I want to keep them. I want to find a way to not only make people care about them, make the players care about them, make the schools care about them, but also maybe make those guys who are NFL bound care about them enough to say, you know what, one more game with my brothers and we actually get something out of this. I think there's got to be a way to do that, and maybe somebody smarter than me can figure that out.
Well, anyone who is as devoted and disciplined as you to fill up notebook upon notebook, during valuable high school study time, study hall time, I highly doubt that they're going to be able to as eloquently and intelligently argue about, how this can all work. I will merely say that Bob Bowlesby is not that person. For him to be for him to be so condescending about the fact that the fans can just watch it from their televisions. That's why, to me, I was fired up about, I will publicly thank Andy Staples, because I had sent him the question which was asked by Dan Wetzel. Andy Staples replied back to me. He said, Dan Wetzel asked that question that you wanted me to ask. And when he said, oh, people can just watch it on their televisions, to me, that's not only completely condescending, but it's like, that's what's going to happen. Because unlike you and your pal Jerome Baker, who have infinite financial means to travel all around the country, it's the average person isn't going to do it. And that's, in all seriousness, that was that, and the fact that he made the completely asinine statement of, oh, well, I don't think people will want to go to East Lansing in the middle of December when you have NFL playoff games in venues such as that are just as cold, if not colder, such as Green Bay, New England, Buffalo, Cleveland, Pittsburgh. I mean, I could keep going on and on. Of course, like, those fans don't seem to have a problem going to those venues either. So that's why, to me, I think if they can make it work, the passion I have about this is having it, somebody pointed out, oh, like every year, Ohio State, with the exception of, 2012, if the system had been in place, Ohio State would have made it every year, and they would have hosted 3 times. I'm thinking, no, they should have been able to host every year, not just, the years that they didn't, rank, as the Big Ten champion, or what, like the 2015 team would have been ranked number 7 or something like that. I saw, all these different permutations as to how this would have worked. In my opinion, that's what you want. Is you want college football. It's bad enough that during the early season games, like Alabama, playing, it doesn't matter, USC or Duke or Michigan or whoever, playing it down in, like Jerry World. No offense to Jerry World. It should be at, in Bryant Denny Stadium.
Yeah,
Or,
everything on a campus.
that's
Everything on
right.
campus.
That's
Yeah,
right. That's all I'm
that's
saying. Is
that's
like
what's so great about college football.
That's right.
That's what makes it unique and
That's right.
special. The
That's
tradition is what
right.
it's all about.
That's
Um,
right.
so, on a scale of 1 to 10, what's the irony level of Bob Bowlesby having the word bowls in his name?
Exactly. There you go. It's off the charts. It's off the charts. Like I said, I just, it's the kind of thing where, again, it's not a done deal.
Yeah.
It's being let me emphasize the fact that it's going to be proposed, and obviously the people who are involved in this proposal feel very strongly that it will pass. But what I'm holding out hope for is that the athletic directors and the presidents will push back on people such as Bob Bowlesby and say, no, it's got to be not only the first round, but also the quarterfinals need to be on campus. That's my strong hope.
Mm-hmm. Well, I may have misspoke earlier when I said you were the straight man, because that was some clever stuff there from you with my infinite finances and my
yeah.
my notebook upon notebook, which was probably just a few pages, but yeah, it was a public school study hall, and that's probably has a lot to do with that. Having that extra time probably had a lot to do with the fact that they weren't teaching us things about things like Juneteenth or the Tulsa Race Massacre
there
in
you
school.
go.
So I didn't have to really think that hard about too much stuff in high school.
There you go. So at least you had the framework of what a college football playoff system could have looked like.
Yeah, I just didn't know that I could have gone into business. I should have just been the Mel Kiper of the college football playoff.
Yeah, well, but then again, it's like you probably would have been scolded on national television like Mel Kiper was, by Bill Tobin back in 1994, like that infamous rant. Who the hell is Mel Kiper? That would have been, who the hell is Michael Citro?
Yeah, it's fine. As long as I'm getting his paycheck, I don't care.
There you
As
go.
long as I'm getting the ESPN paycheck.
As long as you can keep pace with your buddy Jerome Baker, with your, trying to keep up with the Ferrari acquisition.
That ship has sailed. That ship is never coming back. All right. Well, I think we hit on some great topics this week, and it's the NCAA dealing with name, image, likeness, and dealing with a playoff expansion. I don't know. The NCAA tends to move at a glacial pace, and I don't know if we'll see. I don't know if we'll see anything this year. I don't know if we'll see anything next year. We'll see.
It could be, yeah. I mean, I like the speculation is that it's going to be that there might be it might be in time for the 2023 season, but there's also speculation that it might not be until 2026, simply because when it comes to the whole negotiations with ESPN, and I'm going to get this wrong and I don't have it in front of me, but I think the contract expires with ESPN in 2026. And if the college football playoff were to try to renegotiate this, which I'm sure ESPN would love, I think they get an exclusive window, is the way I understand it. Like, they get exclusive negotiating rights to this. And that's part of why there's a lot of speculation about them trying to include the Bulls, because that might be in part of the contract. So like I said, I think there's a lot of legal maneuverings that are going on that we're not privy to. I mean, my compliments to the people that did come up with this proposal, in all sincerity, is that, this isn't something that, like that they just hashed out, like within, like the last month. Like, this is something that they've kept under very, very close secret, no leaking for, probably like the last year or two, in terms of like how this was all deliberated. So that's my compliments to them for, being able to kind of come up with something that, with the exception of the quarterfinals being played at both sites, I can certainly endorse.
All right. Well, let's see how it goes. I think we've covered a lot of great topics this week, and the cool thing is we get to come back in 2 weeks and see what else we can yell about.
There you go, and we can see how many Ferraris that Jerome Baker has bequeathed to you.
All right. Now you're just doing it too much. Now you're just beating the dead horse.
Sorry about that.
But yeah, it's the cool thing too is we'll be 2 weeks closer to the actual football season when that happens. It's been fun kicking all of this around with you. After we didn't do our show for Memorial Day. But you know what? It was quiet. It was a quiet, and people need a break. They need a break from us because they're getting tons and tons of content from Buckeye Scoop, and you can download and subscribe to all of the Buckeye Scoop Radio Network podcasts, and you probably not have time to listen to them all because that's how much there is. There's so much content, and if you haven't done it yet, you can go to BuckeyesScoop.com, become a member. Sign up for that cheap pizza, the cheap chain pizza every month amount of money that it costs to join, and you'll get all kinds of cool behind the scenes recruiting stuff that might put your mind at ease if you're interested in Ohio State getting commitments from certain recruits, and in some cases maybe you won't like what the recruits are saying behind the scenes, and that our insiders are finding out. But at least you'll know, and then you can move on. So either way, you really win.
Easily, as you just said, easily, one of the best investments you can possibly make for any Ohio State fan who always wants to be on the cutting edge, so to speak, of what's happening, regardless of whether we're talking, as you said, recruiting. This can be who's kind of standing out on within like the weight room workouts, on the practice field. Our team of insiders are definitely we're certainly among the very first to know about players who are truly making positive moves within the depth chart. It's certainly well worth the investment, as you said. Improve your diet, improve your knowledge by subscribing to Buckeye Scoop.
Yeah.
By improve your diet by getting rid of the cheap pizza. Improve your knowledge by subscribing to the Buckeye Scoop.
Yeah. Besides, if you're gonna eat pizza, just eat good pizza. Good pizza is better.
There you go.
Yeah. So Buckeye Weekly comes out on Tuesdays and Thursdays usually. Sometimes they do extra shows. They've got a Patreon, so you can subscribe and get ad-free special episodes. And the Morning Scoop is Monday through Friday. You've got Gives in the Bank, with recruiting stuff. You've got all kinds of shows. Scoop World Order. You got the Sloopcast. Tons and tons of great stuff. So go and subscribe. You, Chip Minnich, can tell everybody where to find you on the internet.
You can find me on Twitter at Chip Minnich. Last name is spelled Minnich. And besides being a co-host with Michael on this fine podcast, I'm also a contributor to Athlon Sports, where I am occasionally tasked with writing not only about Ohio State football, but also sometimes about MAC games during the season. So as it gets closer and closer to college football season, as Michael said, you're going to start to see more and more information and articles, hopefully from me, on Athlon Sports.
Maction Minnich, I'm going to call you.
I'll take it.
All right, you can find me on, of course, BuckeyeScoop.com as the grumpy old Buckeye during the season. And also you can follow me on Twitter at Mike36Fan. I often opine on all things college football, most big sporty things, and music, and all kinds of crazy stuff. So it's a little bit of everything. But during the college football season, it's a lot of college football. And some NFL stuff too. So anyway, we'll be back in a couple weeks, Chip, to do this again. There'll be, I'm sure, new news to deal with. There'll probably be some commitment news we can talk about because some more visits will have occurred. You know, we got JT Tuoloma visiting, I think, in this third group.
Yes, this coming weekend.
Yeah, so that's big. Hopefully that'll go well. If you're not an insider, join BuckeyeScoop.com right now because you're going to want to know every little detail of his visit. I think.
And and again, can't hype them up enough. Our insiders, they pretty much, when there's breaking news developments, it's the place to be, because it's the kind of thing where what seems to be common knowledge, elsewhere on the internet is kind of like old news to the insiders at Buckeye Scoop. They were the ones who heard it first.
Yeah, and it's a big relief, I think, to guys like Tony Gerdeman, who can then post the stories that they've written 2 weeks ago.
There you go. And he can opine about things that he's truly passionate about like boneless wings and things of that nature.
Yes, he's very passionate about boneless wings. I don't have a dog in the fight, but I like chicken. I heard there's a bone-in wing shortage.
That's true. That is true.
So if there's a shortage, then you could help the world by eating more nuggets.
There you go.
And buffalo sauce tastes the same on no matter what kind of chicken you put it on.
Very good point.
So I don't discriminate, but I do like listening to Tony on the Buckeye Weekly, so I can find out about these brand new products like Mountain Dew.
Yeah. Well, at least, and his taste in beer has expanded. So, I mean,
it had nowhere to go but up.
That's what I'm just saying. Like the come for the football knowledge, not for the culinary experiences, because they're not good. So
yeah, exactly. All right, that'll do it for this episode of the Silver Bullets podcast. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. If there's anything you want us to talk about on the show, or if you want to ask us a question, hit us up on Twitter. We gave you those Twitter handles a minute ago, but let's give it to you again now that you got a pen and you're ready to write them down. It's at Mike36Fan and at Chip Minnich, Minnich. Ask us anything, and we'll talk about it on the show. So until next time, Chip, I think the only thing left for us to do is what we always do at the end by saying, "Go Bucks!"
Go Bucks!